If you're getting ready to start the home buying process, or even if you're getting ready to put your home up for sale, you're going to want to spend a couple of minutes to check out some of the information we're going to go over today, which is actually earnest money. It's one of the topics that mostly gets glossed over when you're discussing the ins and outs of buying and selling some real estate, but it can actually be one of the few things that can actually be kind of a crucial part of the deal. And today we're going to kind of unpack that a little bit from both the buyer standpoint and a seller standpoint. My name is Jonas Helbert. I'm with Streetlight Realty. I'm one of the top producing agents in the Miami Valley. So I've got plenty of experience helping both sellers and buyers understand earnest money and what it means to the deal and how it may or may not impact them by the time they get to the closing table. Quickly, let's just kind of discuss what earnest money is. Simply put, it is good faith or a pledge by the buyer of how serious they are to follow through with the terms of the contract, and it is put up at the beginning of the sale. So once the seller were to accept that offer, mark the property pending, the buyer, because the house is no longer being actively marketed, they're going to put some money down to show the seller that they are serious and committed to fulfilling the terms of said contract. Now, one of the myths about earnest money is that buyers are entitled to get that money back if they walk away from the deal. And that may be true, but it all depends on the contract that you're using and what the protections are for the buyer when it comes to their earnest money. The primary contingencies for the buyer to try to get that earnest money back if the deal does not go through is going to be appraisal. In other words, if the house is under contract for $100,000, but the house is only appraised for 90, buyer and seller can't come to agreement, you would expect that the seller and buyer are going to return the earnest money back to the buyer through no fault of their own. The deal simply didn't work out and terms could not be met to renegotiate price. Financing. There's in the contract that I use, there is a finance contingency where if something were to go wrong with the buyer's financing, they again would also be entitled to try to get their earnest money back. The seller would have to sign off on a release for that to happen. The most common reason for a property to fall apart and to have earnest money be requested to be released back to the buyer is going to be inspections. So you may have every intent of moving forward, but maybe there's a major inspection item that comes up, structural damage, new roof, something that prohibits the seller and the buyer from coming to terms. The buyer is no longer satisfied, wants to back out of the deal. Again, they would be entitled to their earnest money, but they would still have to work with the seller to get those funds released. Unless otherwise stipulated, funds are not auto-released to a seller or a buyer. So keep that in mind. You look at this from a buyer standpoint. One of the most commonly asked questions for me is, well, Jonas, how little do I have to put down for earnest money? It's a nice idea not to have to put a lot down. So I understand where that question is coming from, but what you got to understand is the amount of money you put down shows how serious you are. $500 to $1,000 is fairly common for like an entry-level home. $1,000 is also fairly common, but if you could put $2,500, $3,500, $5,000, if there is a multiple offer situation, you're going to look more serious to the seller because you're willing to commit that much money to the deal and show that you're not going to try to play any games to try to renegotiate price or back out of the deal over something frivolous. You're going to be pretty committed. Again, you're going to have to get the seller to sign off on this. So the more you put down, the more you have at risk, and the more compelled you are going to be, and the more compelled you're going to be to see the deal through. So from the buyer perspective, or from the seller perspective, it's just that. The more money a buyer is willing to put down for earnest money or the good faith, the more confident you can be that that buyer plans on seeing that deal through. They're not going to back out simply because they found a better property. If you're a buyer, what you need to understand about this earnest money is that yes, you may be entitled to these funds based on certain criteria being met if you do not fulfill the contract or can't fulfill the contract, but we have to get the seller to sign off on it. That's very, very important. A lot of times a buyer's agent will tell them, oh, absolutely, yeah, if there's something wrong with the inspection, you 100% get your money back. And that's not true. It has to be mutually agreed upon that those funds are going to be released back to the buyer. One thing you can actually do to strengthen your offer is you could say, hey, not only am I going to put X amount of dollars down, but I'm also willing to make this a non-refundable earnest money, and it would immediately go to the seller if I were to back out of the deal. You'd have to be fairly confident that you're going to push forward with the deal, that your financing is going to pan out, that it's going to appraise, and that you're not going to have any major inspection issues. But if you are comfortable with that, that is something you could do to show the seller how serious you are. So when you're the seller, all you're looking for is how much are they willing to put down, because that's going to be the barometer. That tells you how serious they are about committing to this deal and how much money they're willing to put down. It shows you that they have cash in the bank. There's a lot of tells that you're going to get from being the seller and seeing how much earnest money they're going to try to put down. Now, if they're not putting a whole lot down and there is a multiple offer situation and most of the offers are not putting more money down, it is something where you could go to one of the buyers and say, hey, we like your offer the best, but we would actually like you to put more earnest money down to try to gauge how serious they are about trying to win this bid and how serious they are about your property. That kind of wraps up the points I wanted to talk about with earnest money. There's not a whole lot to it, but there's a lot that can be gleaned from the amount a buyer is putting down, and the biggest of which is how serious are they and are they going to want to push forward. If buyer and seller cannot come to a decision on how earnest money should be released if the deal does not stay together, the earnest money will actually stay on hand with either the title company or the brokerage where it was initially deposited as instructed by the contract, and it could stay that way for 2+ years. You would have to get with the title company to see what their specific rules are about releasing those funds. They may actually be a little bit different than a brokerage. So make sure you understand what's going to happen to that money if you cannot come to terms as buyer and seller. And that, folks, kind of wraps up earnest money. Again, I'm Jonas Helbert, Streetlight Realty. This is the Miami Valley Experience. If you found this content to be educational and you appreciated it and you think other people could enjoy it, please do us a favor, like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. The more we can grow the channel, the better off we are and the easier it makes it for us to continue making content. So if you do enjoy this, please share it, please like, please subscribe. Have a great day.